moving on to the bass, we're going to create a new synth for the bass too. So let's open up another Mai Tai, and we can initialize it if it's not already, like we did before. And this time we're going to go with a saw wave because it's harmonically rich, meaning the sound is thick. It has a lot of harmonics in it. And then we're going to remove some of those upper harmonics by taking the filter down, maybe a bit around here. That sort of situation. I'm setting the filter at a point where, because we're going to have the filter move from higher up down. So I'm setting its lowest point right now. That's what I'm considering. How dark do I want the sound to get in its finality? So maybe like that is even better. From there, we're going to shape the volume curve, the volume envelope, amplifier envelope of the sound. So I'm going to bring the release up again to about 150, just so it doesn't click when I release it and it's got a kind of smooth roll off. I'm kind of modeling this after a real bass, like an electric bass. I'm often thinking that way, is like, what are the best elements of a real instrument that I can incorporate into my synth so that it has a greater sense of realism and movement in it. From there, I'm going to drop the sustain all the way down and pull the decay out to maybe like 8 seconds. And then I'm going to curve this, bend this curve quite steeply, and we're going to get this. So it sounds more like a real instrument. It decays over time, and it decays in this curve. I've found that this kind of curve is the smoothest way to decay a sound, especially a bass sound like this. The next thing is to have the filter move just a little bit so that it has a kind of attack sound that decays into the rest of the sound. We do that by coming down to the mod matrix down here. We can switch this off, which is the mod wheel. It comes pre-baked into the thing. Turn that off. And this one we do want. Envelope 2, which is this shape right here, is going to control the filter cutoff. It's going to control this. So this is a picture of how this is going to move through time, where at the bottom, that is its current position, and at the top, that's how high it's going to get eventually, which is controlled by this. So meaning if I throw this all the way up, it's going to fling the thing all the way to the top of the cutoff and then track it down. And I don't want it that much. I want it about halfway or so, maybe like this. And the decay is the important factor here. How long should it take to follow this curve? I want it to be about 1 second. So let's pull this down to, yeah, like 960 or whatever. Let's hear that. Now if I turn that off and on, you get a little bit of an ow, 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 as opposed to ooh, 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 ow, ow, ow. So like a real bass, it has more high frequencies at the start and they decay over time, like all instruments do. Just the damping of the strings and many factors. And that's literally it for the bass. It's super, super simple, but it's very effective. It's going to work perfectly for us. So we can close that down now, and we're going to talk about playing the bass line. And all we have to think about here is what the harmony is, what the chords are. Remember, we're playing on the piano. We're playing an E major E chord, E sus2 kind of chord, and an A major E chord, A major 7, A major 9, A sus, whatever. It doesn't actually matter. It matters that it's E, and it matters that it's A, and it matters that it's major and it's major. So what you do is you think about the key you're playing in, so in this case E major, and if you know how to play your E major scale, you can see all the notes that are available to you to use here. And then on the downbeat, meaning when the chord changes, you play the note that corresponds to the chord that you're playing. So when the chord is an E and the downbeat hits, you play an E. And when it's an A, you play an A. The other notes in between can be other things, and we can talk about that. All these rules, guidelines, can be broken at will, of course, and I usually do. In this case, because we're talking in a simple way and we want some clear, a clear effective bass line, we're just gonna keep things very simple. Root note of the chord on the downbeat, move around a little bit, root note of the chord on the next chord on the next downbeat when it changes, move around a little bit. Now, as for the moving around a little bit, there's a couple ways to go about it. You can just use your ear and just play around within the key. That's completely fine. You can also think about the chord you're playing and the other chord tones. I'm going to take this approach. So I'm going to hit an E on the downbeat, and then I'm going to walk up to its fifth, up to the next octave of the root. So I'm playing E, B, E. Then I'm going to leap down to the third of the chord to walk up into the A. It just so happens that the third of E is one note below the next chord, which is A. So I get this. So that's going to be my first line, is just that root, fifth, root, third, walking up. I'm going to hit the A on the A chord, and then I'm just going to flip back and forth between going down a half step and coming back again. Nothing fancy happening there. It's just a common bass move. You hit the target note, and then you flip down to an adjacent note, the one right below or the one right above, and you flip back again. It's a very simple thing to do. So we're hitting this, and then we walk up one note, which is the fifth of the first chord, and it's going to take us back. Then we repeat the same movement, and this time we'll make a variation. We're not going to go doo-doom, we're going to go doo-dum-da-doo. So we're going to walk up to the third of the A chord, down a step, back to the B like we did the first time, and drop down. So I'm going to record that line, and then I'll show it to you in the MIDI. Here we go. Now, if you consider the things I just said and you look at this line, you'll be able to figure out exactly what I'm talking about. All this stuff is just what I said. I'm going to do a quick analysis of it just to make sure that everything is in order rhythmically. It actually looks pretty good, and then we'll be looking at the next variation of it. One thing I forgot to mention when making the synth is that we need it to be in mono. So here's the mono button instead of poly. This just means that it can only play one note at a time instead of playing multiple notes at a time, so that when I have something like this, where this note overlaps in here, it will cause this note to stop playing and this one to re-trigger, kind of like a choke group in the impact stuff we were talking about. So amazingly, I played it almost perfectly the first time. It's not that hard of a thing to play, Max, but you know, I'm kind of proud of it. So we're going to duplicate the whole loop now because I want to have a variation of the line. So I'm going to duplicate like this, and then we can highlight everything and set a new loop around the whole thing. And on the second time around, I want the first part to remain the same, but at the end, I want to signify the end of this second thing with something completely different that we haven't heard yet, which is like a walk up. So I'm going to grab this A note and have it just walk to its third. So here's the A. On the next quarter, we're going to have the B. On the next quarter, we're going to have the C sharp. And then on the last quarter, we're going to have the E walking down to the B, just like before, down to the A. So we can get rid of this guy and drag these out so that they're touching a little bit. And we should be good to go. And that's our whole line.